For a ground effects car, connecting the front and rear aerodynamics is essential. To give a sense of how the rear influences the air travelling underneath the front of the floor, the air molecules are moving at the speed of sound. This means if the air pressure in the diffuser can be lowered, it is likely going to affect the front in a similarly positive way. It has been established that the floor fences of the current generation Formula 1 cars are effectively front wings creating downforce through pressure difference. An indication of how connected the front and rear of the floor is the length of a vortex generated by the pressure gradient. It appeared in the previous simulation that established the function of the floor fences, and the resultant vortex dissipated as it entered the diffuser. I suspected that there wasn't a sufficient volume of air entering underneath the floor, and the diffuser was too aggressive or at least the wrong shape. For this, remodeling the floor, I chose to alter the midsection. This section allows a bigger difference of volume of air entering and exiting the floor. If the floor profile changed, the height of the chassis would need changing to keep the current concept. Anyway, most changes to the floors by any team has tended to be in the midsection, which probably means something. Overall, I ran 4 models, with 2 floors. With that, the best floor was taken, a notch was added, then the diffuser was shortened forward of the rear beam wing. Compared to the last video, I got an increase of more than 22% of downforce for the body, equating to about 10% overall. Currently that is a CLA of -3.08, with a plank height of 15mm and no rake. This 15mm may be a bit high, considering the ride height and its dynamics being so critical with these cars. The first mid-floor alteration was a reasonably conservative shape, that kind of had a balanced geometry, front and rear. The premise was to let more air in under the floor between the inner fences. The diffuser had the section behind the plank lowered to reduce the impact of the inevitable turbulence that comes from this step. This cut was moved forward and rounded off. This wasn't the best result overall, but was equivalent to most of the gain, with a change of 19 of the 22% increase in body downforce. Going by the wall shear stress surface map, there's more area with high stress values. Now there is an additional structure along the tunnel's edge. Using my favourite plot along the centre line of the car, the red line compared to the blue is a much different shape, with the midsection up to the floor end of the plank having a much lower pressure. Apparently the diffuser is now less aggressive. This plot also suggests the centre of pressure moved back with the new model, but it actually moved forward by a couple of centimetres. But this result suggests continuing to make gains on the floor will push this further forwards. The next model with the altered midsection decreased the width of the front and pulled the rear in later and more aggressively. The characteristics are basically the same as before, but the floor is now more rear biased. Overall performance suggested by the centerline plot is that it's better. Apparently, it's just 1 point better. Considering these 2 models basically met my objective of making the diffuser work and connecting the front of the floor with the rear, this can be identified with the wall shear stress maps having a continuous high value strip representing the floor fence's vortex carry all the way into the diffuser's exit. In general, the diffuser is less turbulent and more symmetrical. Probably should have just left this here, but now for some modifications and getting ahead of myself. I added these notches that the Ferrari had added sometime between Imola and Monaco, otherwise known as Barcelona. These didn't make things better, it actually reduced the performance by about 4%. I thought they might be able to spin up the main vortex and make it bigger and stronger. In this configuration I don't know what it is doing. Some wild speculation would be that they affect the low running performance, or preventing the vortex from stalling at an ultra-ride height, that is, reducing porpoising, but I don't know, but now they've disappeared and that probably doesn't actually matter. Now what I should have done instead. Reduce the length of the diffuser to in front of the rear beam wing. This reversed the previous losses and then some. Here is probably a good lesson why proper analysis is better than copying. Because the logical step is to further the connection of the floor's front and rear to enhance the diffuser's extraction with the available beam wing, which I would have done just by looking at the interaction between the floor and the beam wing. Anyway, at least the diffuser is mostly working, and the floor is generally better according to my favourite plot. This change also reduced the symmetry a little bit, but there is significant performance gains anyway. To wrap this video up, I think these following images start to give the detail of the flow structures around the body, so you can start overlaying the features seen on the actual cars when viewed from below. However, give it 6 months of development, and this will probably not make any sense anyway, so I'll point out some things that I think that are important on the edge of the underside of the floor. First is, just behind the end of the floor fences there are some outwash, where teams have flipped up sections with strakes. Corresponding with their size will be a vortex, likely all rolled up and rotating this way. This will travel along the edge of the floor, likely sealing it to a degree with its momentum. More dependent on the upper surface is the edge wing. It goes to about here, but it also depends on how late the car pushes out the air from under the side pods. Next is the skates and some other flick-ups. The skate is angled along here, and is either directly in line with the air, or providing a bit of an edge for the incoming air to butt up against. Lastly, there is a flick-up just in this region in front of the rear wheel. Anyway, having improved the effectiveness of the diffuser, the floor edge now looks like it needs a bit of work. It is likely adding some pieces in the same area that the teams have could provide some development.